Fyodor Dostoevsky, writer of some of history's greatest novels of all time. One of the greatest Russian authors along with Tolstoy, Solzhenitsyn, and Bulgakov. Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky was born November 11, 1821, in Moscow, Russia. He was born into a devout Orthodox Christian family and was the second child of 8. His father was a successful doctor, and his family lived on the hospital grounds where his father worked. Young Fyodor had a turbulent childhood which shaped his life and novels later on in his writing career. In 1837, when he was 15 years old, his mother died from tuberculosis. 2 years later, his father died from an unknown cause. At this time, Fyodor started to show first signs of epilepsy after learning of his father's passing. Before making the age of 18, he lost both of his parents. He left school to study at St. Petersburg Military Engineering Institute, pursuing a military career. He highly disliked the academy primarily because of his lack of interest in science, mathematics, and military engineering. After graduating from the academy, he briefly worked as an engineer but soon found his passion in writing. He left his work and focused solely on his writing career. That resulted in his first book published in 1846 called Poor Folk. His book achieved commercial success and gained him popularity in the St. Petersburg literary circles. Little did he know that later these kinds of circles would get him in so much trouble. Dostoevsky started to attend secret meetings with other writers and thinkers on utopian socialism, which was a very bad idea in a Tsarist autocracy like the Russian Empire. These meetings led to his arrest in 1849 by the Russian government for participating in a group known as the Petrushevsky Circle that discussed banned books that were critical to Tsarist Russia. He was sentenced to death by firing squad. On the day of the execution, the criminals were put in line to be publicly shot, and then suddenly, a moment before Dostoevsky and his comrades were going to surely face death, a message from the Tsar arrived, pardoning them. Dostoevsky later described the experience of what he believed to be the last moments of his life in his novel, The Idiot. Following this, Dostoevsky was instead sent to Siberia, where he was forced to work grueling labor at Omsk, followed by a term of compulsory military service for 6 more years. During the 4 years in the labor camp, he started to fall into an addiction to gambling, an addiction that would leave him constantly bankrupt for the rest of his life. It even inspired him to write the book The Gambler, which was a semi-autobiography that explores the psychology of gamblers. He delves into the destructive effects of gambling on individuals and their relationships. At the end of 1859, Fyodor returned from Siberia a different man. He would start writing again, but in a very different manner. He distanced himself from utopian ideals and instead focused on inner psychological and spiritual explorations. His comeback to the Russian literary scene was with the publication of his famous novel, Notes from the House of the Dead. Again, it drew inspiration from his 4 years spent in the labor camp in Siberia. Over the following 20 years before his death from lung disorder in 1881, Dostoevsky produced several masterpieces, which are considered some of the greatest works of literature to this day. Some of these are Notes from Underground, Crime and Punishment, The Idiot, Demons and the Brothers Karamazov. In Notes from Underground, published in 1864, Dostoevsky explores the true meaning of the word freedom and choice. He uses the character of the underground man to critique the rationalists and utilitarians of his time and explore the inner depths of human consciousness. The novel ultimately revolves around the idea that true freedom and authenticity come from our own choices to sometimes act against our own interests, embracing suffering and seeking to undermine our own happiness. This paradox reflects the complexity and sometimes irrationality of the human nature. In his next masterpiece, Crime and Punishment, he continues to explore this knowledge of the inner human nature, or the lack thereof. The main character in the novel is Raskolnikov, a former law student that murders an old pawnbroker and her sister to prove that some individuals are above the moral laws that govern society. However, the guilt and paranoia that the character experiences after the crime are overwhelming. Dostoevsky's message is that the burden of guilt and the torment of a guilty conscience can be more punishing than any external punishment. Raskolnikov embodies duality, the inner conflict between the rational, calculating side and his emotional, compassionate side. Here again, we are presented with the complexity of the mind and its inner struggles that we all face as humans. In his novel, The Idiot, published in 1869, Dostoevsky nearly mirrored his own mock execution when he was young. In this book, Dostoevsky writes the famous quote, "Beauty will save the world." It leaves the readers wondering, how can he, whose life was filled with tragedy, near-death experiences, pain, and grief, proclaims that the beauty of all things will save us all? In short, it suggests that the contemplation of beauty, goodness, and higher ideals can inspire individuals to seek truth and redemption. It embodies the idea that the transcendent power of beauty has the potential to elevate the human spirit and bridge the gap between conflicting forces in a troubled world. Later, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, in the 1970 Nobel Prize lecture, said, "In that case, Dostoevsky's remark, 'Beauty will save the world,' was not a careless phrase but a prophecy. After all, he was granted to see much, a man of fantastic illumination." Fyodor Dostoevsky was a man who changed his sufferings into blessings and his experiences into stories. As we wrap up this whirlwind tour of Dostoevsky's profound themes, remember that his novels are more than just words on pages. They're a reminder that in our darkest hours, in the depths of our despair, redemption is not a distant dream, but a tangible reality. So pick up a Dostoevsky novel and let his words ignite your imagination. Just as Raskolnikov found his path to redemption, just as Prince Myshkin embodied boundless compassion, so too can we find our own redemption in the labyrinth of our lives. Dostoevsky teaches us that we are not defined by our past mistakes or the burdens we carry. We are defined by our capacity for transformation, by our ability to choose love, forgiveness, and compassion in a world that often seems devoid of them. Remember that life itself is a grand novel, and you are the author of your own story. With each choice, each act of kindness, and each leap of faith, you can rewrite your narrative toward a more profound and fulfilling existence. This was Anthony from the Wonder Gate. Thank you for staying until the end of the video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons for more videos of this kind. See you next time on the Wonder Gate channel.